Committee on Homeland Security Oversight, Investigations, Accountability under the broader Homeland Security Committee will come to order. The purpose of today's hearing is to examine how China is using illegal marijuana to build a criminal network across America. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Today, the Oversight, Investigations, Accountability Committee is holding this hearing on how the use of illegal marijuana as tied into the criminal network tracing to China is impacting the United States. First, for order of business and announcement, the gentleman from Texas, Al Green, will, from this point forward, be serving on the Oversight, Investigations, and Accountability Subcommittee for the remainder of the 119th Congress, and we look forward to working with him. We are here today to talk about an important issue, significant national security implications. This issue has been prevalent not just in Oklahoma, my home state, but in many other states, Maine, California, and all across our homeland. Let's paint the picture together. A group of Chinese nationals affiliated with foreign criminal organization crosses the southern border, makes their way into rural Oklahoma. With them are workers who have been lured under the false promise of good jobs in the United States. Once in Oklahoma, these Chinese nationals approach a local resident with an offer they cannot refuse. They offer the resident several hundreds of thousands of dollars, purchasing, using their time, their identity, to purchase a nearby tract of land. In return, the resident gets to keep a share of the money with no questions asked. The deal is quick and it's simple. In a matter of days, this newly purchased land becomes the site of a large-scale illegal marijuana grow operation. The workers find themselves forced to work 14-hour days under the watch of armed guards, all while being confined to small living quarters, minimal running water or air conditioning. The smell of toxic fumes, fumigation from pesticides that are lit on fire that we know have caused major health consequences, banned in this country, are utilized for these grow operations. Hundreds of pounds of illegal, contaminated marijuana is then produced, ends up in the hands of people all over the United States, from Oklahoma to New York. This is just one example of how Chinese grow operations come to operation in communities all across the country. Oklahoma has had thousands of these operations activate at one time. Sadly, as we'll learn today, this is only scratching the surface of what these Chinese-affiliated criminal groups are doing. Many Chinese illegal operations serve as fronts for a wider criminal enterprise, including human and drug trafficking, prostitutions, weapons smuggling, and money laundering. And while the example I highlighted takes place in our home state of Oklahoma, similar patterns are repeated in other states like Maine, Massachusetts, California. In fact, there are thousands of these grow operations dispersed through our entire country, including tribal lands and national parks. We have a really excellent panel of expert witnesses before us today who are going to walk us through this issue and how it affects the Homeland Security posture. Specifically, I'd like to focus our conversation on the serious crimes taking place inside of these illegal grow sites, as well as how Chinese transnational criminal organizations, or TCOs, many with directly ties to the Chinese Communist Party, are setting up these sites all across the U.S. as they expand an underground criminal network in our backyard. We are holding this hearing today because we've enabled these foreign organizations with potential links to the CCP to build up a sophisticated network throughout the United States, which facilitates a wide range of other criminal activity and presents a national security threat. This is a convergence of organized crime, human drug trafficking, public health risks, all operating at scale and sophistication, crossing state, national lines beyond the normal capabilities of state and local law enforcement to combat. These agencies need the help of federal law enforcement to unravel these criminal networks. In fact, some of the foreign nationals running these grow operations are more heavily armed than local law enforcement. One of my field reps in Oklahoma heard from a journeyman electrician who was hired to do some work on a rural property. When he arrived at the site, he found what appeared to be a large foreign-run marijuana grow house, and he personally observed an armory of dozens of assault rifles and ammunition crates. This network must be uncovered and eliminated from our homeland. And it's really that simple. The potential threat that comes from having fully operational criminal network associated with top foreign adversary on our soil is too great to ignore. I look forward to an informative and productive discussion. I now turn it over to Ranking Member Thanadar for his opening remarks.
Good morning, and thank you, Chairman. And good morning to all of our witnesses here. I want to welcome my colleague, Congressman Al Green from Texas, on this committee, and look forward to his contribution to our proceedings here. Now, if you take a stroll through DC's neighborhoods, you're likely to encounter the National Guard planting flowers or picking up trash, and federal agents making traffic stops. This supposed crackdown on crime has also played out in Los Angeles, is unfolding in Chicago, soon coming to Memphis, and being threatened by the Vice President that they are on their way or coming to Detroit if needed. Trump's occupation of America's largest city is reducing the federal government's ability to pursue serious, complex crimes. HSI agents have paused pursuing human traffickers. DEA agents are not uncovering drug rings, and FBI agents stopping investigating financial fraud. Instead, they issue citations for open containers of alcohol, fare evasion, and traffic offenses. The same federal agents who investigate money laundering and organized crime are also being deployed to Home Depot parking lots to arrest migrants looking for work. Who is investigating the thousands of illegal marijuana farms that currently exist in this country? And I'm not talking about someone who is growing a handful of pot plants consistent with their state's law and regulations. I'm referring to marijuana that is being grown by organized crime in our federal forest, business districts, and suburban neighborhoods, perhaps even at the house next door. These illegal grow sites are run by Mexican cartels, Cuban drug traffickers, and increasingly Chinese organized crime. Just a few months ago, in my home state of Michigan, local law enforcement arrested 4 Chinese nationals after discovering over 5,000 marijuana plants worth around $5 million in a warehouse. The billions of dollars in proceeds from illegal marijuana help finance China's Belt and Road initiatives, a plan to wrestle global influence away from the United States through foreign investment in developing nations that the Trump administration has cut aid to. The illegal marijuana proceeds also fuel Mexican cartels that traffic deadly fentanyl to the United States. The marijuana black market is riddled with human trafficking, human smuggling, and forced labor. All too often, migrants are lured to farm with the promise of decent work. Once they arrive, their identification is taken away, and they are forced to work 16 hours a day and live in substandard conditions. Illegal marijuana cultivation sites are also stealing our scarce resources, such as water and electricity, while poisoning public lands and banned toxic chemicals and pesticides. Illegal marijuana farms are a threat to our national security, human rights, and the environment. The federal government has had some successes through the organized crime, drug enforcement, and task force. For example, in January 2024, a federal jury found 2 Chinese nationals guilty of possessing and distributing marijuana. Over a 7-month period, they shipped 56,000 pounds of marijuana from Oklahoma to the East Coast. In June 2024, the Justice Department charged associates of Mexico's Sinaloa drug cartel for conspiring with groups linked to Chinese underground banking to launder drug trafficking proceeds. Despite these wins and others, the Trump administration has proposed eliminating funding for the OCDETF. I am leery that OCDETF is being replaced with Homeland Security Task Force that will further elevate immigration enforcement at the expense of other law enforcement missions, including those best suited to tackle illegal marijuana. The multifaceted threats posed by illegal marijuana farms run by organized crime require a coordinated national strategy and the resources to carry out that strategy. I look forward to hearing from today's witnesses about the resources required of the federal government to snuff our illegal marijuana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ranking members, and members of the committee for inviting me to participate in today's hearings and your interest in Chinese-owned marijuana farms. This topic is not of only a public safety interest, but also the interest of America's national security. My name is Donnie Anderson. I am the director of the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics. I've dedicated over 34 years of my life to public safety and drug enforcement in the state of Oklahoma. I can say without hesitation that the impact of black market marijuana in Oklahoma is unlike anything I've ever encountered in my career. What is even more alarming is the growing influence and involvement of the Chinese Communist Party in this illicit industry. Please understand that what I share today represents only a fraction of the broader threat we face. Several investigations remain open. I am unable to comment on them further without jeopardizing the integrity, endangering the brave men and women at the Bureau who are investigating these cases, or violating the laws to prohibit disclosure of active investigations. In 2018, Oklahoma voters approved medical marijuana State Question 788, drafted by marijuana advocates. Unfortunately, the law imposed no limits on the number of grow operations or the quantity of plants each could cultivate. This lack of regulation has led to a staggering oversupply. Between March of 2024 to March of 2025, licensed grow sites reported 87,210,960 plants in the state of Oklahoma, yet dispensaries sold just a little over 1.6 million pounds of marijuana in a dispensary. Given that one plant typically yields 1 pound of processed marijuana, over 85 million plants are unaccounted for, representing an estimated $153 billion in missing product and proceeds. To put this in perspective, as of September the 9th, 2025, Oklahoma has 324,850 licensed medical marijuana patients. The scale of unreported inventory is deeply troubling, especially considering the black market producers routinely underreport their plant count. Oklahoma's medical marijuana framework has inadvertently opened the door to international organized crime. Criminal actors exploit the system to produce high-potency marijuana for black market distribution, fueling what is now estimated to be a $153 billion illicit industry. A particular concern is a high prevalence of Chinese nationals involved in these operations. Their presence has a profound effect on both our state and national security. Consider the following examples. In 2022, 4 Chinese nationals were executed in an illegal marijuana farm near Hennessy, Oklahoma. A 5th individual was seriously injured. The operation used a fraudulent license obtained via a straw ownership. April of 2024, law enforcement arrested multiple suspects in connection with a robbery and homicide at a grow site in Okfuskee County in Oklahoma. The victim, 53-year-old Harry Dam, was fatally shot. In July of 2025, a Canadian national was found murdered execution style at a grow operation near Lake Thunderbird just east of Norman, Oklahoma. The death is believed to be the result of a targeted robbery. The investigation remains ongoing currently. These incidents are just a few among many. Beyond these murders, state authorities have documented a sharp rise in violent crime linked to black market marijuana operations masquerading as legal enterprises. The Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics reports associated crimes including human and sex trafficking, money laundering, illegal gambling, extortion, theft of water and electricity. Our agency currently employs one Mandarin-speaking agent. However, this is insufficient when suspects communicate in Cantonese and Fujianese, languages that Mandarin speakers cannot reliably translate. Compounding this issue is the widespread use of WeChat, a Chinese-owned platform used for both communication and financial transactions. Because WeChat is based in mainland China and encrypted, U.S. law enforcement cannot serve legal process or conduct electronic surveillance as we would with domestic platforms. These apps fall outside the scope of the Communication Act of 1996 and Electronic Communications Privacy Act of 1986, making them a major obstacle in our investigations. Oklahoma law requires marijuana business owners to be state residents with at least 2 years of residency. Yet nearly all Chinese-operated grows circumvent this requirement through fraud and straw ownership. In one instance, a single Oklahoman was listed as the owner of approximately 300 marijuana farms in Oklahoma. This widespread fraud is facilitated by consulting firms, real estate agents, and attorneys who help establish these shell operations. Alarmingly, many of these grows are located near critical infrastructure, including military bases and pipelines. For example, in an ongoing investigation, the Department of Defense reported suspicious activity at a marijuana grow operated by an ethnic Chinese group located adjacent to the McAllister ammunition plant. This ammunition plant is the largest in the United States that is also responsible for manufacturing the Moab massive ordnance air blast bomb and houses close to the third of the department. It maintains a third of the Department of Defense's munitions stockpile. That's where it's at in McAllister, Oklahoma. This is no doubt the Chinese government has shown interest in Oklahoma's marijuana authority. We have documented financial transfers to the Bank of China and connections to businesses owned by the Chinese government. These concerns have amplified by recent reports of CCP activity in operations like Salt Typhoon, which my agency was directly affected. Regardless of property ownership, it is my belief that the CCP maintains access to these sites, particularly through its known practices of controlling expatriates via so-called police stations. Thank you for your time and attention to this critical issue. I'm available to answer any questions you may have or to provide additional information as needed.
For 60 years, one of the primary arguments made in favor of the legalization of cannabis is that it will eliminate the black market. The rationale given was that people would prefer to avoid criminal prosecution for using cannabis, and they would like to purchase it from a store with a quality reputation and a quality product. Over the last 5 to 10 years, we now know that that argument is a fugazi. The black market has not disappeared, even though a majority of states in the United States now have approved either medical or recreational use marijuana programs. In fact, the problem that you have taken up is a matter not just of public health, which is the way cannabis issues are normally thought of. It's a matter of domestic or homeland and national security. Why? The businesses that we see across the nation selling cannabis for medical or recreational purposes are not run by 50s-era beatniks or 60s-era hippies. They are run by Chinese organized crime with the tacit knowledge and acquiescence by the People's Republic of China and the Chinese Communist Party, two entities that are sworn enemies of the United States. That raises a clear homeland and national security aspect of this problem that has been under-discussed in all the debates over cannabis legalization. This is a serious problem. According to the Whitney Economics Organization, the cannabis market is a $100 billion industry. 75% of it is the illegal market, and 2/3 of the cannabis sold in the United States is grown domestically. So we're talking not just about somebody who is growing 5 plants in a home in connection with, and as authorized by a state law. We're talking about people growing massive quantities who are part of an organization that has nothing but the worst interests of people in our neighborhoods in mind. I mean, the existence of this black market is recognized by numerous parties. Senator Joni Ernst and 49 other members of Congress sent a letter to then Attorney General Merrick Garland asking him to look into this. There have been numerous other organizations and think tanks that have written about it. And there are beaucoup media stories, written, print, or in the TV media on this. They all agree that this is a serious problem because it is not simply the illegal distribution of controlled substances that is at issue. It is all of the associated crimes that occur. As the ranking member pointed out, we'll see money laundering, human trafficking, prostitution, fraud, and various types of violent crimes, including homicides, as my colleague has pointed out. All of these damage our local communities. But it's not just that. The money that Chinese organized crime made from illegal fentanyl sales has helped underwrite their cannabis business in the United States. And the money that they make in the current operations can be used to spread those operations into other states and other areas, as well as for other purposes that do not have the best interests of the United States in mind. Now, if this were just simply a small-scale matter rather than a coast-to-coast matter, it might not merit the attention of anything other than the legislatures, the executive branch, and law enforcement in those states and neighborhoods. But it is, in fact, from coast to coast, from Maine to California. And Oklahoma, which is probably halfway between, has seen a very serious problem, as for the reasons my colleague gave, because there is unlimited grows allowed in that state. Now, as I mentioned before, this is not simply a problem of domestic people that have broke bad. The Chinese organized crime elements are working with the tacit knowledge and acquiescence of the PRC and CCP. Now, the law does not require a formal agreement amongst those parties in order for them to be held criminally liable. As I have explained in some of my writings, the conspiracy laws allow someone to put together a case based on various types of circumstantial evidence, of which there is an ample amount here. What we have is a national problem involving a drug that, unfortunately, is seen as being milder in some ways than others, and pharmacologically, in many respects, it is. But cannabis is very harmful if you use it on a long-term basis or in very serious doses.
During my 24-year career with the DEA as an agent and executive, I saw firsthand the damage done by transnational criminal organizations, TCOs, and the increasingly significant operations of Chinese transnational criminal organizations. Over the last 5 years of my career, I led a team at DEA's Special Operations Division, SOD, dedicated to an operation called Project Sleeping Giant, which sought to understand, identify, target Chinese organized crime operating in the United States and abroad. We were particularly concerned about the rise of Chinese money laundering networks, which have transformed narcotics trafficking by offering dramatically lower rates, lower risk, and quicker return of funds than the networks that had previously laundered those funds. Project Sleeping Giant's objectives included understanding the Chinese organized crime threat, developing intelligence on it, and designing enforcement operations to mitigate it. As a result of the investigative and intelligence gathering operation, we learned that Chinese organized crime was involved in a wide range of criminal activity globally, including being the Chinese suppliers of precursor chemicals used in fentanyl production in Mexico, becoming the primary money launderers for the Mexican cartels, which have been recently designated as FTOs, human trafficking networks, global operations that corrupt government authorities, wildlife trafficking networks, and of course, Chinese-controlled marijuana cultivation within the United States. So what have the Chinese money launderers done with the proceeds of their criminal activity? Starting in 2017, when a wave of marijuana legalization was sweeping through the United States, we started seeing the profits of the laundering of Mexican cartel proceeds get invested into marijuana cultivation and distribution operations by Chinese money launderers. The speed and organization in which the Chinese-controlled marijuana grows were established was nothing short of remarkable. As the Chinese money launderers provided the funding for the grows, trafficked Chinese citizens into the United States to live at the grow locations, tending to the plants on a 24/7 basis. They then trafficked the marijuana to cities for sale. All of this happened seamlessly. It was extremely well organized because it was being managed by Chinese organized crime and Chinese money launderers at the leadership and command and control level. What is the best way to combat the threat? First, there is a critical need for local, state, and federal officials to recognize that activities including Chinese marijuana grows and distribution operations are not just weed cases. They are harmful in and of themselves, and they also help fuel Chinese money launderers and organized crime-linked activity, such as human trafficking, fentanyl distribution, and other dangerous, harmful activities. These cases should be prioritized as they are linked to the larger criminal networks. State and local governments individually do not have the necessary resources and authorities to attack and dismantle Chinese marijuana trafficking networks. State and local governments typically lack the subject matter experts, language skills, data scientists, confidential sources, and other law enforcement capabilities that are needed to address the threat. Federal funding, coordination, and authority combined with state and local resources, intelligence, and their authorities is desperately needed. It is essential to use the federal racketeering, money laundering, continuing criminal enterprise prosecutions to target the leadership and command and control levels of these operations, similar to what we did in the late 80s and 90s against Italian organized crime. For organized crime leaders, Chinese organized crime leaders need to understand that the federal government will aggressively target them with severe consequences. Using other federal authorities to target the related crimes such as human trafficking, money laundering, tax evasion, mortgage fraud, as well as state and local laws and regulations governing the cultivation operations themselves and those governing land, power use, and water violations will have a material impact. Lastly, even at the federal level, specialized task forces are needed to effectively target Chinese money launderers, Chinese organized crime engaged in marijuana trafficking activity. A fully funded intergovernmental platform will allow for law enforcement to better identify the criminal networks and dismantle them state by state. Congress can play a vital role in providing resources, incentives, and authority to the federal government.
Director Anderson, how do these Chinese-backed illegal marijuana operations run? How, for the regular American, they're going, well, how is a crime organization from China able to run a marijuana farm?
These are very, very sophisticated. When I say sophisticated, this is at a level that law enforcement across the nation has never seen before because they are that sophisticated and that complex. They're layered and they're hidden under many, many layers of LLCs and ownerships. When you begin to look, for example, in Oklahoma, you may have a John Smith who is the owner, the 75% owner of the marijuana grow. And as you dig through that thing, you'll find out that John Smith has never even been to the marijuana grow. John Smith was paid $3,500 to put his name on a license because the Chinese national can't do that in the state of Oklahoma. And that's how that happened in Oklahoma. But you have people in Flushing, New York and in California that run a lot of stuff across the whole U.S. that may not ever step foot in the state of Oklahoma other than to make a visit every once in a while. But these are very well organized, very sophisticated, and it's not, whenever I talk about this is really a global thing that's going on with the Chinese nationals. If you look at what's going on down in Latin America, what the Chinese are doing down in Latin America, even to the Caribbean, they're building roads. I mean, they're really investing in this stuff, but there's a reason why this is going on. Once again, this comes right back to the U.S., to the national security, and what's going on in as well as to Oklahoma. But you're right. I don't think the majority of the people in the U.S. realize what's going on. People in the marijuana industry really hate on me. They think I'm just against marijuana.
Right.
I'm not. For me, it has nothing to do with marijuana. If someone wants to ingest marijuana, that's their business. For me, it has everything to do with the transnational criminal organizations who are doing things such as trafficking in very large amounts of marijuana. They are laundering billions, not millions. Oklahoma's probably well over $100 billion just for Oklahoma. The murders, the sex trafficking, which is probably one of the most deplorable things that we have to deal with. How we treat other humans like this, I just don't get it. But the rest of the U.S. probably don't know really what's going on. And it's not just Oklahoma. Yeah, Oklahoma's kind of the epicenter of kind of what's going on right now because we do have such a liberal marijuana law. But the sex trafficking, the violent crimes, the underground casinos, the underground banking is going on all across the U.S.
Chinese money laundering that's taking place. Why is it so difficult for us to understand how it's being done and to prevent it from being done?
Yes, sir. They came to dominate the industry for several reasons. One, in the past, there was always a certain cost to money laundering. It was 7 to 10%, certainly, to get those funds back to the Mexican cartel. The Chinese money launderers changed the game in that, one, they absorbed all the risk of laundering those funds. Two, they did it for 1 to 2%. Three, the funds that are collected, the bulk cash from sales of narcotics in this country that they take ownership or custody of, they began to sell to Chinese nationals that wanted to invest in the United States. They do this globally with a trusted network with what's called the Chinese underground banking system. And last but certainly not least, they utilize the encrypted app called WeChat, which is controlled and monitored in mainland China, that US law enforcement cannot have any judicial process. We can't wiretap it. So what it allows for is that organized crime network globally to communicate with trust and speed. No other organized crime group in the world has ever had a communication system similar to this.
And are they using cryptocurrency? Explain, please.
Yes. So certainly in the last 2 years, the crypto component of the money laundering cycle has taken on a much more substantial role. As crypto is being used more and more globally, it's actually taken on more of a role in the money laundering process because the Mexican cartels would like to receive those funds in crypto. So it's part of the process now.
How do you recommend we deal with this, given that we now have these electronic transfers? Makes it rather difficult to, I want to stop it. I'm just trying to get a sense from you as experts as to how we can do it.
So the networks that exist right here within the United States, those Chinese money launderers on a daily basis pick up that bulk cash. So what we were talking about earlier of this interagency task force that was designed to go after Chinese organized crime with severe penalties such as the racketeering laws should be stood up and funded. That's the first thing. The second thing is, in terms of what we saw last couple of weeks ago from FinCEN, that directive to the banking industry to enhance compliance, red flag reporting on the money laundering transactions. And lastly, WeChat itself needs to be impacted. It cannot be utilized by Chinese money launderers on an ongoing basis, again, in this trusted network where they can communicate and move money.
Mr. Larkin, to what extent is the CCP tied to these Chinese TCOs operating in the United States? Do you believe that the CCP is aware of the Chinese nationals who leave China to establish criminal operations in the United States?
China is the most heavily surveilled nation in the world. It's difficult to believe that the CCP is unaware of people who are engaged in criminal activities in other nations, like what's happening here with Chinese organized crime. And keep in mind, you don't have to prove an affirmative agreement between them. All you have to do is show through circumstantial evidence that the CCP is aware of and is helping out the organized crime measures. If you look at the statements the three of us have submitted, you'll see there are various types of evidence that points to knowledge by the CCP and the PRC of what is going on in Chinese organized crime. And that's the sort of evidence that the Supreme Court has said would be sufficient to justify a guilty verdict for conspiracy to engage in this activity.
In terms of the open border of the last 4 years, how did that affect organized crime in your local communities?
So I understand, and I got to say this. First off, I'm not a politician. I'm not even a political.
I'm not asking. I was in law enforcement before I ran here.
But I have to say that because it's going to sound like I am.
Nope, I'm asking you your
I'm
perspective.
telling you, and I've seen it both ways.
Yep.
I've seen when we couldn't get anything. I mean, matter of fact, we were on a T3, and we was purchasing kilos of methamphetamine, and Trump closed the border down during COVID. Nothing.
Yep.
I mean, it was 6 months.
And cocaine, and
Anything.
heroin,
Anything.
and crack, all of it.
And
Yep.
then we leave, we change administrations, we're flooded, we're inundated with controlled dangerous substances. Once again, I'm not making a political statement, I'm telling you what I've seen.
And what effect does that have on law enforcement? Can you successfully fight crime with an open border?
With an open border?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
We're concluding here. Last thoughts. We have 3 minutes, so essentially a minute each. Mr. Urban, final thought.
We've demonstrated what the effect is on the communities. We have the intelligence. I would ask that you fully fund a task force to attack these networks. This is not that hard. It's tough work, it's difficult, it's challenging, but fund a task force and give them the mandate to attack these networks with individuals like Mr. Anderson, please.
Mr. Larkin.
In the short run, the most important thing to do is educate the people in your communities about these problems. I think when people think of drug problems, they think of Mexico. They don't think of China. They have some idea that China is involved in selling fentanyl precursors, but they don't realize the full extent of the tentacles that China has extended into the United States. The public needs to know this. Holding this hearing is important, but it is also important that you tell the people in your communities about what is happening. Remember, the Chinese are playing the long game. They can do this for decades, for centuries. They don't care. But we can't do that. We have to act now.
Mr. Anderson.
I think it is imperative that we educate the public on what's going on in the nation, especially when it comes to the CCP and the rest of the world. And the movement that we know that we are seeing that is going on and transpiring. And when you're talking about the long game, they're in the long game. They've been doing this for many, many years. And when we talk about what's going on with the money laundering between and the precursors, since we can go all the way back to 2007. That's what we know for sure. Whenever the cartels started reaching out to the people in China and making these deals, that's how far back it's went. So we're already into the long game. One thing I would ask legislation to do and to seriously look at. I do think we're better whenever we bring all of our resources together and we combat a problem, because you're talking about a really huge global network. We have to bring our people together, we have to bring our experts together, and we have to fight this within. I would also ask that this legislation looks at the Communication Act of 1996. If you look at, and you've been a federal prosecutor, you look at how we've dismantled criminal organizations across the U.S., we've done it through that act. That act is outdated. The criminal element has surpassed us. We can't do the cases like we used to because of all these encrypted apps that are floating around on everyone's phones. So I would ask that you look at that as well.
偷偷告诉大家，我最近发现了新法宝 Royal Face 逆时奇迹系列，它有活肤露、全效精华，还有精华霜。尤其我皮肤比较偏干，所以我非常的注重保湿。保湿做得好，肌肤自然烹润。提亮肤色更年轻，抚平皱纹超有感，而且气色变好。用心保养，每天都更美一点。美吧。